Let's talk about user-defined methods. What is a method? It's a block of code, and it's relatively an independent block of code. Now when we talk about, what do we mean by block of code? Well, usually you have instructions that you're executing in sequence. Here we're going to take sort of a chunk of those instructions and put them in an independent block, so that we'll have specific input that's given to this block of code. It will process it and have specific output that'll be provided. Why do we want to do something like this? Well, there's a lot of reasons. Some of the more pronounced ones are listed here. I think number one, code reuse. The less you have to code, the less bug-prone things will be. Encapsulation. You're trying to hide the contents of how things are done. Maybe you're dealing with some very proprietary information and you don't want other people to see what you're doing. You can create a function or a method, have all of your, patentable ideas stuck in there, and just return whatever value you need to from that. Also, you can make your code more modular, and readability is a great thing about it too. So methods do something in particular. What they do is they change the scope of the code you're working in. Now what is scope? Scope's kind of this very abstract idea. Well, scope actually limits what variables, fields, and methods you can see where you're currently executing code. Again, why do we use it? Like we mentioned before, we can do encapsulation and data hiding. So if you're working with variables in your main function and you call a method, you can't see the variables that were in that main method. They would have to be somehow specifically passed to our new method. So let's look at some code to make this a little more concrete. We have class methods, and we have our main method that we've seen in all our other programs. And I've declared a couple of variables here. We have a height of person 1, P1 height, in inches, and person 1's weight, P1 weight, in pounds. So I need to calculate the person's BMI. That's what we're trying to do here. I'm first going to convert their pound weight into kilograms because we're still on the archaic English system. And then I'm going to go ahead and convert the height, which is in inches, into meters. So here are my two conversions to do that. Then I have a couple doubles here. And then to actually do the BMI calculation, I take the weight in kilograms and divide by the square of the meters of the height. And then I'm going to go ahead and print it out. So just again, we compile, we run, and we can see, wow, we have a BMI of 81, which I guess somebody who's 3 feet tall and 150 pounds would have a pretty high BMI. I have a second person's height and weight declared here, and I want to calculate their BMI as well. So I'm going to go ahead and copy all of this code and start modifying it to person 2, person 2. And I'm going through this, you can kind of see it's tedious and it could be error prone too. What if I forget to actually change one of these 1s to a 2? Is there a better way to do this? Well, yes, of course. We're talking about methods, so methods are here to save the day for us. And let's see. Okay, so I keep doing this, keep doing this. How many times do I have to hit 2 and 1? Okay, so I think I've got this correct. I'll go ahead and compile and run. All right, so we've gone from a person at 150 pounds at 3 feet There's a huge BMI to a person that's 150 pounds at 8 feet, which is extremely low BMI. But this is a lot of code duplication for really no reason. What we can do is create our method. So we'll create our method up here. And we'll say public static. We're going to return the BMI, which has a decimal point, so I'm going to return a double, because that's our return value. I'm going to call my function calc BMI so that everyone knows what this function does. And then I'm going to pass in two parameters. The parameters I'm going to pass in are an integer, and that's going to be the height in inches, and another integer, which is going to be the weight in pounds. And so we were talking about data encapsulation, hiding, and readability. Since if somebody else is going to use my function, this is what they're going to see. They're going to see that it returns a double, that it's named calculate BMI, and then it takes in height in inches and weight in pounds. And we want to be really careful about how we name our function declarations, because this is what makes it readable. Anybody who sees this calculate BMI function, hopefully from the name, realizes what it's going to do. Also, with the parameters, hopefully everybody, with the parameters named how they are, it should make sense of what values you need to pass in to our function. So we were looking at our flow diagram of our input, processing, and then our output. If you look at it from the coding perspective, here's our input to the function, these two parameters. It's going to calculate our BMI, which will be this code inside here. And then the output is this double, which in this case will return our BMI. So what's our code going to look like? All right. So let's start looking at what we have down here. So if we take these 3 lines of code, let's get rid of those and move them into our function. Okay. So if we try to compile this, what do you think is going to happen? Because this is now the functionality we want, but it's not quite right yet. If we compile, we're going to get an error saying it can't find P1 weight. Well, why is that the case? It's declared right here. Sorry, right here. Now this goes back to what we were calling scoping. Because we are in these brackets, in this method, the scope has changed. We're no longer in our main scope. So all that this function knows about are the parameters being passed in and any variables that are being declared inside of it. So instead of using P1 weight, we now need to use weight in pounds. And since this isn't going to be specific to a person, we're going to change this variable name too, and we're going to call it just kilograms. Same thing here. Height is not, this P1 height variable is not in this scope, so the compiler doesn't know about it. Instead, what we want to use is our height. I can type in inches, which is one of the parameters being passed in. So the compiler knows about this one. Again, P1 doesn't mean anything in this scope, so we're going to call it meters. And down here, we're just going to calculate BMI. Now again, we can't use these variables anymore because they're not in this scope. We have to use ones that are either passed in or declared within it. And since these have been declared within it, we're going to use them. So we're going to now use kilograms and meters. Okay, so we have our function that calculates the BMI. But now how do we actually send it back to our main? We can go ahead and call our function, and we will do that here, maybe. And we'll say calculate, calc BMI, and we'll pass in our P1 height and our P1 weight. Well, this is great. We've called our function now, but how are we going to get the BMI back? Well, we have a special statement called a return statement, and we're going to tell the compiler that we want to return the value BMI from our function, from our method. And that's what's going to get filled into this double here. So then we go ahead when we call it, we're going to say double, because that's the type, person1 BMI is equal to what we're calculating in this function. And then we're going to go ahead and print it out. Okay, so if we compile that, and if we run it, yay! We have the same BMI that we calculated before, only now we're using our function to do it. And this looks a lot prettier. The people who are reading your code don't have to understand what these conversions and function and formulas mean. They just know that you're calculating BMI. Okay, so we can now look at how this is nice for code reuse too. We can get rid of these lines and go ahead and call our BMI function again with person 2's height and person 2's weight. Now if we recompile and run, we see that we get the same output, but we just have a lot cleaner code, a lot more readable code, and we're hiding all of this messy calculations that are being done inside. So, well, I hope this helps your understanding of methods, and have fun.